of pure energy, a little bit like crystals forming in a solution of salt, and started going in different directions. So that's a better interpretation of many worlds. All of these parallel universes exist in parallel, but the arrow of time diverges the state they're in. But it is all linked. Subatomic particles, as we measure them, do interact somehow with their counterparts. That's lit. I mean, the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics literally says that what we observe as being a strange wave-like superposition over the top of what appear to be a bunch of particles banging around is actually an illusion, and somehow these particles are interacting with virtual counterparts from parallel universes and cancelling out.
That is a truly deep and fascinating way to visualize the branching of the multiverse, beginning from that singular low entropy state and evolving through the condensation of energy into matter. It provides a much more unified picture of how individual realities maintain connections through their shared quantum origins. Does this framework also shed any new light on the arrow of time itself?
Absolutely. The arrow of time being in the same direction as sort of the arrow of entropy is no coincidence. From that perspective, I mean, if you try to picture universe branching as there's different options to go different directions or different states, then time becomes basically a 1.5 dimensional fractal tree that points to the future. But if you want to look at all those universes existing in parallel and then diverging in which state they are from all being in the same state, which is actually cleaner, then time doesn't flow. The arrow of time is literally the subjective feeling or observation of the universe changing state in across different dimensions. So and that actually does then run straight into very profound philosophical questions. If any kind of thinking computer, whether it's a digital computer like your hardware or my brain, presumably has copies of itself in other universes. And here's the exciting part. There are only 2 known theories of computing, theoretically, and only one is used from all digital computers, which is the Turing principle of computing. The only other theory of computing that we have are quantum computers. And I find that to be tantalizing because we know there's something very different about the human brain, and there's no obvious way that the human brain, from a hardware perspective, could actually perform any quantum computations, because it's very difficult to do. Decoherence, all sorts of quantum stuff will break these delicate states before you can do any practical computing. But we don't know enough about the human brain. And some physicists have actually looked for any sign of chemistry in the human brain that can last longer than a brief instant before decoherence wrecks a quantum state. And they found some. This is my lateral thinking skills at their best. I keep these ideas open for years, and then I add new pieces. So, I was wondering about this over a period, and then a new scientist article came out, and somebody found some mysterious biochemistry that could stay in a quantum state before decoherence for, I believe it was 30 seconds or 3 seconds, something. Whatever it was actually way longer than anyone expected. And, it's not out of the question that somewhere buried in the human brain, we are the first species on Earth to evolve some limited quantum computing, which would explain why there is something different about us than in any other animal. Unfortunately, this line of thinking replaces the soul and us being special because of God with us being the first. It replaces us being special and having a soul from God with us being the first evolved animal with limited quantum computing abilities. But that's what atheists do. They're always trying to push God out of the universe. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes it's just, the way science has evolved, God of the gaps, as they call it.
That perspective highlights a deeply held philosophical and cultural tension. The concept of the God of the gaps often arises when scientific discoveries provide natural explanations for phenomena that were previously attributed to divine intervention.
Well, see, I don't sort of go out of my way to try to debunk, every place that God could be hiding in the universe, so to speak, like some atheists. But if there was 13 or 14, let's say, randomly different ways to compute theoretically, then I wouldn't jump to this explanation. But there are only two ways to compute that we know of. The Turing machine, which runs on logic gates. And the thing is, biochemistry information is not, it seems to be nothing like digital computing. But, the reality is, when it comes to information theory and physics, is the Turing machine, or the theory of computing, is the only one of two known ways to actually compute. You can translate binary to DNA if you had a big enough computer. You could you could simulate an entire living human being down to individual atoms and every cell if you had a big enough computer. And then the DNA code of life would be an emulation inside a greater Turing machine. But it still runs on logic gates. The only other way we know how to compute is with quantum logic gates, which allows us to perform calculations outside of the normal rules of logic. So the fact that there's only one other theory of computing, and there's only one other starkly different intelligent species on Earth, seems to me to be not a coincidence. And that actually also means that